I announce it down.
We now come to Dr. Rupert Huck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and what a pleasure it is to be called so unexpectedly early in this debate. Obviously, your algorithm is working, even though it's not for other things. Testing, exam results. Anyway, let's not get into that. I must congratulate my honourable friend for coming up so loftily in that private member's ballot, a sensation I've never experienced and probably never will. And he's also obviously the chair of the Business and Industrial Select Committee. He's one of those people on this side of the House who's going to actually make his mark on our statute book. All of us dream of the day we can do that. He's actually, it sounds like from what the Minister says, going to be able to do this on the other side of all this. And I rise to speak in support of his bill. I have heard the points against and taken them on board, but I think they're all refutable, actually. Because, you know, this legislation seeks to right a whole load of wrongs that are going on in our society. You know, we've heard about miscarriages of justice, unreliable evidence, and also it kind of reins in the once seemingly untrammelled forces of the free market. And we've seen something of that in the pandemic. Yesterday, another sort of financial stimulus announced. So I'm glad that this government are now sort of converts to interventionism that some of us have always been. And great to have this at a time when it seems that we're all so preoccupied with either coronavirus or Brexit. So something a bit different that's so badly needed. Look, the word forensic seems to be used recently every Wednesday, doesn't it? When PMQs happens and our leader of the opposition takes apart the Prime Minister. But forensics, plural, is what we're dealing with today. And, you know, when mere mention of that term sort of conjures up images of these wily experts solving cold cases long after the fact, dissecting the details, piecing together the evidence from the crime scene. And we think of skillful professionals, you know, these with their high-tech, high-end resources that they have at their disposal, no expense spared, crusading for justice in the public interest. And, you know, often these sort of American drama serials, the transatlantic type, have shaped our imagery of this in the public imagination. Programmes like NCIS and CSI. And I know, actually, our last Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead, is a big NCIS fan. At the height of the cross-party talks in her Brexit negotiations, I found myself face-to-face with her at number 10, and I asked to break the ice, as you do, was being Home Secretary like bodyguard? And instead she enthused about NCIS, which is her favourite programme, which it was more like. So, look, I mean, we know that forensics started about a century ago with fingerprinting techniques. And then, you know, it can stray into things like taking fragments of carpet fibre, even bite marks. But by the 80s, when DNA profiling of samples was pioneered, that's when this field really came into its, really got a spring in its step. And in today's world, it's accelerating. The use of this is going on, because cybercrime, with cybercrime rapidly rising, it's needed more now than ever. Of course, I give way to the Jen.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. She commented before a little about the free markets, but wouldn't she think with DNA profiling and fingerprints, there's actually a happy marriage between forensics on one hand and the free market on the other, both lending their expertise to the other?
He's right. We need a mixed economy approach on this. So, yes, we can allow private firms, I'm not saying ban the private sector, but to coincide with regulation, which is a good thing in many states. Yep.
Speaker, I just wanted to share, she referred to the history of forensics and indeed fingerprinting. Just a small anecdote with the House, which is in the early days of fingerprinting, the Metropolitan Police were in pursuit of a particular criminal who was apparently came to their attention had been apprehended in Germany. And they sent away to the German police to ask for this criminal's, he sadly deceased, but asked for this criminal's fingerprints to be sent so they could close the case. And the German police amputated his hands and sent them whole, and they sit in a jar of formaldehyde in the Met Police's Crime Museum to this day.
I'm going to goodness me, we live and learn. You learn a new thing every day. I mean, what a gory story there. But I mean, I would say that it's a sad thing we're leaving the European Union. We had access to all those databases, didn't we? Europol. I think that's a cause for lament, but that's probably another debate for another day. So, I mean, look, unfortunately, the reality of Britain's forensic services is far removed from the glamour of NCIS. And Britain's Sherlockian sleuths or Clouseauian crime detectives, they do exist in our police forces, and they do a sterling job, but they've been hampered and held back for years, at least 7 years, as my honourable friend said. And there's kind of 3 reasons for this. The first is due to cuts in police and research. Reductions in budget forces have, for instance, adversely affected spending on private forensics, and the honourable gentleman opposite, who in the last Parliament valiantly attempted to do this, sadly the election that not all of us wanted put paid to that. You know, whatever happened to the Fixed Term Parliament Act? I think it's going soon anyway. But as he pointed out, the expenditure on this has come down from 120 million in 2008 to 50 million at the moment. The House of Lords Science and Technology Select Committee uncovered these figures last year. And second, there's uncompetitiveness. So even for fans of the free market, this is not a good way of running it. It's a sort of fragile state of the forensics marketplace, because it's not pure one thing or the other. Then we've got the laxity of the regulatory regime, despite the fact there is a forensic science regulator. And this bill seeks to address this by calling for a new forensic science regulator, so our justice system is better equipped to deal with modern crime. Mr. Speaker, when it's stated that innocent people are repeatedly being wrongly convicted and criminals are escaping the long arm of the law due to a failure of the forensic science system to meet basic standards, and that claim is made by the regulator themselves, something's obviously gone very wrong. And it's no exaggeration to say it's positively criminal that the watchdog, and that's currently incarnated by Dr. Gillian Tully, she acknowledges herself so toothless or so lacking in cojones that it's a purely advisory thing. She doesn't have the legal powers to require private providers to meet standards or impose fines if they don't. How did we get here in the first place? Well, actually, it was under David Cameron, another PM, who kind of swiftly left the crime scene, didn't he? Who, in the words of, I'm going to quote a Nottingham University professor of jurisprudence, Paul Roberts, he specialises in this field, he says, in a moment of penny pinching madness that future governments may regard with incomprehension, the UK coalition government closed down the world-famous Forensic Science Service, the FSS, arguing quite improbably that the private sector would fill the gap. This move to free market forensics is not meeting the justice system's need for high-quality scientific support and has put in jeopardy long-term forensic research, development and training. So his lamenting of the closure, and these are words from 2015, is what he calls part of a landscape of austerity justice, across which cuts to legal...
Minister.
I just wanted to point out to the Honourable Lady that while she's right, the Forensic Science Service was closed, and part of the argument for it being closed was the cost of it, because it was losing very significant amounts of public money at the time. There had also been a series of forensic science failures, which had resulted in high-profile abandoned trials at the time, which meant that reform was felt necessary. It wasn't just purely an ideological, it was as much a practical and results-driven decision as anything.
Just for the record, I would like to say they did actually provide a very good service. The labs at Chorley were fantastic. Dr. Rupert.
Grateful to the Minister and for the Speaker to point out what used to go on in the labs of Chorley, not the stuff that happened in Germany, obviously. But it's quite different to the German case. But look, the Minister, I don't want to pick a fight with the Minister because we're all agreeing on this. And those were words from 2015, that article. And to be fair, some of those austerity justice cuts have been reversed since. So fees for employment tribunals, that's gone. And, you know, they're under new leadership as well as us. So, you know, let's hope that we can reverse all those things now. And we have been told repeatedly that austerity is over. So, you know, let's rectify this now. Numerous authorities on the subject, the National Audit Office, the Science Select Committees, both in this House and the other place, have all concluded that our forensic system is kind of close to broken. And this harms the criminal justice system as a whole. Putting the forensic science regulator on a statutory footing is a vital first step to saving the field. It's not, as my honourable friend pointed out, a panacea, but it's a good first step, it's a good start. Statutory enforcement powers are badly needed in the wake of the weak market that's emerged since the FSS was privatised in 2012. I think it's been pointed out 90% of the traditional forensic science is delivered by just 3 large providers, to the detriment of both competition and market resilience. So even fans of the free market can't like the way it's functioning here. Large providers are exiting the market left, right and centre, creating system-wide capacity shortfalls and increased turnaround times. Simply put, there isn't even a profit motive to uphold standards in these companies, let alone a powerful watchdog. And the rest of forensics, we've heard, is done in-house by police forces that brings its own set of problems. In the context of rapid technological change, police forces have reported difficulties in managing sort of increasingly voluminous and unmanageable workload in digital forensics particularly. Local police forces can't realistically be expected to deal with these new forms of crime or deliver the same high-quality fingerprint evidence the FSS once did. And they're forced to spin all these different plates at once, juggling these balls. Some of them come crashing down. Less than 10% of police forces have met basic quality standards for fingerprint evidence. All UK forces were ordered 3 years ago to ensure their laboratories met international standards for analysing prints found at crime scenes, but only a handful completed as of last year. Police forces have failed to obtain accreditation, that have failed to obtain accreditation have to declare this in court, which then prompts the concern that cases could fall apart because of unreliable evidence. So they're left, police forces, in a sort of impossible catch-22 bind. They could outsource forensics to private providers, which is costly, means spending beyond their means, or they could try and cobble something together themselves. And with the latter option, police stakeholders are let off the hook in the absence of a regulator that can actually say no, think again. But outsourcing digital work to unaccredited private labs that are subject to no regulatory oversight also runs the risk of being punished when their commercial partners botch things up. And the much-cited example of Radox Testing Services highlights this. It was a private provider suspended in 2018 after a number of motorists convicted of drug driving offences were cleared after evidence of manipulation was found in Radox's testing processes. And, you know, there are other examples too of serious offences being quashed as a result of faulty data and contaminated evidence. The sector's badly crying out for quality control rather than this sort of unsatisfactory, on the one hand, quasi-casino capitalism that doesn't quite work, fused with the police unable to cope. The public and private arms of the UK's forensic services are both at breaking point. It's led to a mass shortage of skills, particularly in digital forensics and toxicology. No wonder Dr. Tully said in February, just recently, forensic science has been operating on a knife edge for years. And when you cut corners in legal matters of this type, it is the public who loses out. It's a false economy. We all pay dear. Reliable, high-quality, trusted evidence underpins our justice system in this country. It's simply wrong that victims of some of the most heinous crimes are not seeing their perpetrator put behind bars where they belong, all because the evidence wasn't handled properly. And the kind of anything-goes, sloppy culture has to stop. We should be striving for excellence in every lab, whereas now we don't have a system fit for purpose. We shouldn't be scrimping on justice and putting up with unreliable evidence, as that destroys public confidence in our entire legal system. You know, the wheels of justice will probably turn is not good enough. We need certainty that justice will be served. We've heard before that we've had enough of experts, but I'm glad that this thinking has now given way to following the science. And expert opinion, as I say, you know, there's a long list of expert opinion that's for this legislation. And the Minister said it was in his own manifesto, buried away somewhere. And good to hear heavyweight government support there. As well as I say, these 2 select committees, the FSR's own 2020 annual report all say that quality in delivery of forensic science in England and Wales is inadequate, and it sort of raises alarm bells that crimes may go unsolved, the number of miscarriages of justice may increase. I know at this time in the cycle we're all receiving emails from these sort of conspiracy-type theorist people denouncing the Coronavirus Act as interfering in all of our lives. And I'm no fan of totalitarianism, but on this one, regulation can be a force for good. Clauses 2, 3 and 4 introduce a code of practice, and they're about safeguards and standards, which mean protecting consumers and encouraging a levelling up, to coin a phrase. Which means that, you know, those companies that are on the wrong side of the regulations will simply go out of business. Clauses 5, 6, 7 and 8 allow for investigations with a built-in appeals process. Clause 11 defines forensic science activities as the application of scientific methods for the purpose of detecting or investigating crime and preparing evidence in criminal procedures. But it's sort of flexible enough that there is scope to expand to areas of civil law if needed. So, Mr. Speaker, forensic science plays a pivotal role in modern criminal proceedings, and there's an increasing reliance on it. Yet such evidence can be boon as well as bane, because it poses such multifarious challenges when it's unreliable or misleading. And although biometrics is not in this bill, although it's in the title, you know, we don't want forensics to always be associated with miscarriages of justice, which it's in danger of being. So making provision for the appointment of a beefed-up forensic science regulator, ensuring the regulation of forensic science outfits, and requiring the Secretary of State to publish an annual strategy are all eminently sensible things. I'm delighted that this proposed legislation has so much support from so many powerful quarters, and I too commend this bill to the House.